The day everything fell apart, Brian Sandoval believed that disasters happened to other people. Other men lost their wives. Other men lost their jobs. Other men woke up one morning wondering where their lives had gone wrong. Not him. At least that was what he thought. On a humid Tuesday morning, Brian sat at the dining table wearing the same wrinkled polo shirt he had worn for 3 days. A half-eaten sandwich sat in front of him while a sports channel played loudly on television. His wife, Michelle, stood across from him. She looked calm. Too calm. Brian should have noticed that something was wrong. Instead, he was busy complaining. "I still don't understand why the internet bill is so high." Michelle stared at him. "You've been streaming movies all day for 6 months. Brian waved his hand. "That can't be it." "It is exactly it." Brian shrugged. "Maybe the company is cheating us." Michelle slowly nodded. "Of course." Brian smiled proudly. "See? That's what I've been saying." Michelle closed her eyes. For a moment she looked like a woman trying very hard not to throw a chair at her husband. Their daughter Susan entered the kitchen carrying a backpack. At 16 years old, Susan had inherited her mother's intelligence and her father's ability to say the wrong thing at the worst possible moment. She looked at both parents. "Oh no." Brian frowned. "What?" Susan sighed. "Mom has that face." "What face?" "The face she makes before somebody's life gets ruined." Michelle rubbed her forehead. "Thank you, Susan." "You're welcome." Susan grabbed an apple. "Good luck, Dad." Then she walked away. Brian laughed. Teenagers are dramatic. Michelle sat down. Her hands folded together. That should have been another warning. Michelle never folded her hands unless she was preparing to discuss taxes, school fees, or murder. "Brian." "Yes?" "We need to talk." Brian groaned. Those 4 words have never led to anything good. Michelle nodded. "No. They haven't." Something in her voice finally caught his attention. The television suddenly seemed too loud. The room suddenly seemed too quiet. Brian looked at her carefully. Michelle looked tired. Not physically tired. Emotionally tired. The kind of tired that sleep could not fix. "What's wrong?" Brian asked. Michelle took a deep breath. "I'm filing for divorce." The world stopped. Brian blinked. "What?" "I'm filing for divorce." He laughed. A nervous laugh. The kind people make when they think someone is joking. Michelle did not laugh back. Brian's smile disappeared. "You can't be serious." "I am." "No." "Yes." "No." Brian. "No." Michelle sighed. "See? This is exactly the problem." "What problem?" "You never listen." Brian stood. His chair nearly fell over. "This is insane." "Is it?" "Of course it is." Michelle looked at him quietly. "Tell me the last time you attended one of Susan's school events." Brian opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Michelle continued. "Tell me the last time you took me on a date." Silence. "The last time you cleaned the house." Silence. "The last time you apologized for anything." More silence. Brian felt uncomfortable. He hated uncomfortable feelings. They reminded him of responsibility. Things haven't been perfect, he said. Michelle laughed. It was not a happy laugh. Perfect. Her eyes filled with tears. Brian, you lost your business 2 years ago. It wasn't my fault. You blamed everyone except yourself. Brian looked away. Michelle continued. You promised you'd find another job. I tried. You applied to 3 positions. I was being selective. Susan's voice suddenly came from the hallway. No. You were being lazy. Brian turned. Susan stood there holding her apple. Apparently she had decided the conversation was more entertaining than school. Susan, Michelle warned. What? I'm helping. Brian pointed at her. Whose side are you on? Susan looked shocked. Mom's. Immediately. Dad, even the dog is on Mom's side. Brian glanced toward the living room. The family dog looked up from the floor. Then the dog walked over and sat beside Michelle. Traitor. Michelle almost smiled. Brian felt attacked from every direction. This is ridiculous. Michelle stood. No, Brian. Her voice softened. This is sad. The anger disappeared from her face. That somehow hurt even more. I loved you, she said. Brian froze. Loved. Past tense. Not love. Loved. A tiny word. A huge difference. Michelle wiped her eyes. I kept waiting for you to become the man I married. Brian felt something twist inside his chest. I am that man. No. The answer came immediately. No, you're not. For the first time, Brian had no argument. Because deep down, he knew she was right. The confident young businessman she married 15 years ago had disappeared. In his place stood a man who spent most afternoons on the couch making excuses. A man who blamed bad luck for every failure. A man who expected everyone else to carry responsibilities he should have carried himself. Michelle picked up a folder. Inside were legal documents. Brian stared at them. The papers felt unreal. Like props from a movie. This couldn't be happening. People did not simply throw away 15 years. Did they? Michelle placed the folder on the table. I'm not asking permission. Brian sat down heavily. The room felt smaller. The air felt heavier. Susan quietly approached. For once she looked serious. She put a hand on his shoulder. Dad. Brian looked up. You can still fix things. Hope flickered inside him. Really? Susan nodded. Yeah. Brian smiled. Then Susan finished her sentence. Just not this. The hope immediately died. 3 months later, Brian stood inside a tiny apartment above a laundromat. The washing machines below shook the entire building every few minutes. The walls were so thin he could hear his neighbor sneeze. Twice. The apartment contained 1 bed, 1 chair, and 1 refrigerator that sounded like it was fighting for survival. Brian hated it. The worst part was that Michelle seemed happier than ever. Every time he opened social media, there was another success story. Michelle's new business. Michelle's new clients. Michelle's new house. Michelle smiling. Michelle thriving. Michelle living her best life. Meanwhile, Brian had accidentally burned instant noodles. Twice. He sat on the edge of his bed staring at his phone. A photo appeared. Michelle standing beside a tall man wearing a blue suit. The caption read, "Wonderful evening." Brian frowned. The man looked annoyingly handsome. Perfect hair. Perfect smile. Perfect posture. The kind of man who probably ironed his socks. Brian immediately called his best friend. Mark answered on the second ring. "What emergency have you created today?" Brian ignored the question. "Michelle is dating someone." "Oh. That's all you have to say?" "What else should I say?" Brian stood dramatically. "She's replacing me." Mark laughed. "You replaced yourself years ago." "Not helping." "Sorry." A pause. "Actually, no. I'm not sorry." Brian groaned. "Everyone is against me." "That's because you're making it easy." Brian collapsed onto the bed. The mattress squeaked. Even the mattress sounded judgmental. "His name is Roy." "Okay." "He's an architect." "Okay." "He's handsome." "Okay." "Stop saying okay." "What do you want me to say?" Brian sat up. "I want you to tell me she still loves me." Mark laughed so hard Brian had to hold the phone away from his ear. When the laughter finally stopped, Mark sighed. "Do you still love her?" "Of course." Mark became serious. "Then why didn't you act like it when you had her?" The question hit harder than Brian expected. Silence filled the room. Mark continued. "You didn't lose Michelle because Roy appeared." Brian looked down. "You lost Michelle long before Roy showed up." Brian hated when Mark made sense. It ruined perfectly good self-pity. The phone call ended a few minutes later. Brian sat alone in the apartment. The washing machines rumbled below. Outside, rain began tapping against the window. For the first time in months, he allowed himself to think honestly. Not about Roy. Not about divorce. Not about bad luck. About himself. The truth was painful. He had spent years blaming everyone else. The economy. Business partners. Customers. Friends. Family. Anyone except the man staring back at him from the mirror. Brian walked toward the bathroom. The mirror reflected a tired face. A heavier body. A defeated expression. A stranger. He stared at his reflection. Then he spoke aloud. "What happened to you?" The stranger did not answer. But for the first time, Brian realized he already knew the answer. And for the first time in many years, he wondered whether it was possible to become someone better. Downstairs, a washing machine exploded with a loud bang. Brian jumped. Then sighed. Maybe rebuilding his life would be difficult. Maybe winning Michelle back would be impossible. Maybe he deserved every mistake that had brought him here. But one thing was certain. He had finally reached the point where he could not fall any lower. And sometimes that was exactly where a second chance began.